Hi, Karen.
Hello. Hey, Carissa.
So good to see you here on the Everyday Mystic. It's so fun because we got to work together in a past corporate job and now you're out of corporate world. I think you are entering in a new space, which I'm very much in as well. I feel like I'm straddling those two worlds for sure because I still work with corporate clients and do business consulting.
Hmm.
So being there, but also emanating from a different place, emanating from a different place than certainly when we first met, of being really shut down to who I am as a soul and as a spirit walking this path, to being able to very compartmentalize that and be corporate gal and be very much in that world. And it wasn't that I wasn't exploring spiritual things back in those days. It's just did not bring that into work. And now being in a place of where that is my work. And when I do business consulting and it can't not be part of the work. It is, whether it's fully present to my client or not, it's fully present in me. And that's a really beautiful place to be able to operate from because I feel like we can be in all spaces and do all things, but we're in that beautiful center.
Mm,
And
yeah.
when you reached out to me and we got to reconnect, I'm so happy to see that you're operating as well from this place of soul and magic and in this awe of what this life is here. It's not just the corporate grind. It's not just the accomplishments, achievements, and the things that we think we're setting out for on our life's journey. The life's journey is so different. So tell us about this kind of transitional phase that you're in as you move in a new way on this journey.
Yeah. Thank you. There's two things that popped into my mind as you were speaking. It's one is, man, the woman we were is not the woman we are, like just 100%. Yet we find ourselves surrounded by some of the same environments, but we're not the same. The other one was it's not what we do, as you were talking about. It's not just the corporate speak. It's not just the corporate whatever. It's not what we do. We also get to be, and that is my transition. I'm transitioning from a human who does for everybody else except me, or for me last, or for the me who wants accomplishment, to someone who just gets to be. And it's a really odd feeling, nonlinear up and down journey. It's like, how do I unwind the 44, 45 years of living that has told me, like, do this, be this way, into what do you want? Like, what is it that you are seeking? What makes you joyful? That is such a word that I've struggled with for my whole life. It's like, oh, I'm chasing joy. And I was like, I can't chase joy. I just have to allow it.
Mm.
And so my transition is this transitionary phase is really crossing this gap. And I know I might be throwing out things, but learning who I don't want to be, learning experiences in the corporate world, in the corporate ecosystem, of things I like and don't want to repeat, to, okay, well, how do you not repeat them? To learning all of these tools and techniques and experiences around spirituality, and who am I really, and who do I get to remember who I was from, not just me at this time in this place, but from lineages ago, and like, how do I bring that forward? And then how do I combine it all? So I'm literally in this transition phase where I'm crossing my first big gap. Like, I see who I was, my ego is right there, my patterns are right there. They're so visceral and visible. And I see what's available to me. And I'm not turning around. I'm not going back. But I'm right in the middle of my first big gap. And it feels almost impossible some
Mm.
days. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what so many of us realize, I think, as we set out on this journey, right? The hero's journey is such a beautiful metaphor to this all because we are heroes of our own life, really. I think that's one of the first things that we get to recognize in living a conscious life, or a life that's, we can put that label spiritual on it, but really it's living a life understanding who we really are. And that includes the spirit, right? It includes the spirit, but it doesn't discount the body. It doesn't discount the mind. We get to be all of it. And we get to, as you said, integrate all of it. And the reason it feels so hard and that there are these chasms to cross is because we've been so compartmentalized and so pushed into these silos. And some of us have been completely cut off from spirituality. It's not even a thing, right? I was an atheist for a while because I didn't believe in church God, and I didn't have anything else in that gap, in that period, until I then sought out my own connection to God. So for many of us, it's like, well, we got to go out on that hero's journey and collect those pieces. We go out and collect these aspects of self, these aspects of what life is really all about. And then we get to come and back, bring them back. Those are like the gifts we return with, to then integrate it all. But it's not over once we go on the journey. We integrate and then we go back out too, right? So it's a constant cycle. We've been cycling this way, I think, as souls in a body, having this experience every single time. And we come here to gain more knowledge and gain more understanding, but also gain more experience. So everything that you're doing, and even the stuff that feels shitty, is all incredible experience to gain and gather, whether it's momentum towards not the shitty thing, like just like we're like gonna create a momentum away from that, or it's just having that contrast of going, oh yeah, I don't want that. Well, what do I want then? I know I don't want that. So then you can see more clearly what you do want, and it creates that clarity around that. So all of it is so welcomed and all of it's so beautiful. I think the part that we end up getting as maybe people on spiritual paths can mess up or get caught up in is that it all has to feel blissful and amazing all the time.
Yeah.
And that it all, like, oh, I'm on this spiritual journey. And that means that I'm going to be floating in bliss, and my life is going to be incredible because I'm encased in this spiritual entity and ether. And it's, no, it's not that. It's actually one of the hardest things to go out and do. But you gain such incredible, amazing rewards in the doing of that experience. So I know you're saying you're in the being phase, but within that being, the being and expressing you fully who you are, as the body, the mind, the spirit, this integration, the oneness, the allness. Being that means that you will just do, but in a different way. You're going to do from that wholeness rather than do from that compartmentalization. And so you end up learning a different type of doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Doing from the whole. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a mentor teacher right now who specializes in dissent. He specializes in, how can we be with the shitty, right? So it's like, yeah, I want to go away from that. I want to create a reality that is not that, but I have to go through it at some point, right? Like it's not just pushing it away or ignoring it. And that's a big part. Yeah, that's a big part of what's going on for me right now, is just sitting with this reality of how do I step into this different type of doing and being. And one thing that my mentor's name, her name is Anahita June. One thing that she has showed me and taught me, and that I've gotten to experience, is that this holistic view is, we come in through understanding or knowing or being or feeling, but in order to embrace it all, you have to integrate all of those aspects, and it's not until all of those aspects are integrated that you really can shift. Like that is the identity shift. That's just, I'm not just going to change my mind, or I'm not just going to follow my emotion. It's the whole package.
Yes. Yeah. And the exploration is in those parts that maybe, some people live so deeply within their emotions, and some people live like completely in their heads. And some people, maybe are, floating off, in their spirit and just not grounded whatsoever. And we get to have that experience of getting to know and remembering those other aspects of self, and remembering what gifts those aspects bring us, that they are all gifts. And sometimes we can feel like, oh, my mind is my enemy because all it does is bring up worry and anxiety and these thoughts that are intruding my day to day. And you might feel like your emotions are your enemy because you're always angry or you're always sad. And so you're fighting these aspects of self because it's the shitty stuff. It's the stuff that doesn't feel good. But like you said, the ignoring of it only makes it louder.
Hmm.
Well, and it can get loud, maybe not through hearing it, but it could get loud by creating a condition in your life, a behavior that you don't want, that you can't seem to get rid of, a habit that you have that you can't seem to get rid of. It could create conditions of disease and even accidents. This may be a little more controversial, but I believe that we even draw in the accidents that happen in our life as messengers as well, to wake up these aspects of self that are trying so desperately to get our attention. So it's until we give it the attention, it will continue to do that, right? It's going to continue to knock on our door. So the giving it attention, which then does, when you're sitting with it, can feel, oh, you're sitting in that desperation, or you're sitting in that anger, or you're sitting in that anxiety, or whatever it might be. But I believe that we don't have to sit there for long as we have some tools, right? So what are some of the tools that you've learned and gained in this sitting process, in this being with process, to help you be with it, but in a productive way, or be with it in a generative way, something that will move rather than just the wallowing in, because we can do that. I mean, I spent my teen years all in that, and that doesn't do anything for us either, even though you feel like you're in it. So you're in it, but in a different way that's more, we'll just call it productive. So what are some of the things that you've been doing to be more productive with it?
Yeah, that's a great word for it, because I can tell you, before I didn't know what I know now, and it felt like a trap. Like it felt like this was it. And I just get to hit repeat. And, even though I had optimism, I'm an optimistic person through and through. So I'm going to go find another situation, but it's going to follow me. But I didn't know that. So that was really my only out, is like, I'll just leave and go somewhere else and it'll be different, but it's not different. Some of the tools that I'm doing a lot right now are around that holistic way of being. And so I'm in my mind a lot, which is understanding. And I, know some of the theory or the reasons, the rationale why I get to be different, like why I get to take up space, why I get to belong here and just be me. But I get wrapped up in, at the same time, like, well, am I worthy? Like, am I able and capable? Like, do I know enough? Because we all know we live in this capitalistic society that is all about competition, and may the best one win. And so we get caught up in that. I get caught up in that. And so the way to move out of that is through being. So how can I be? Like, what are one or two things that I can go and do right now that embody the person I want to be, that I am? And just today, like, I'm building a business on how to shift corporate culture, on how to help women move from exactly where I am and was, to feeling like they can create anything they want, that success is on their terms, like they can consciously create this. And so I'm in a market research phase. So I'm like, I can email two women. I can like reach out to two women and say, I want to talk to you today about what I'm trying to create. Here's what I'm trying to create. will you have a coffee? And that just is enough to like move from this monkey mind to, okay, no, I'm on a path that doesn't involve being trapped up in this
Mhm.
monkey mind. I go back and forth between feeling and knowing a lot, right? Like I'm a deep feeler. And so I feel energy in a room. It affects me in ways that I don't always want it to, especially if my partner comes home and I was like, oh no, he's had a rough day or whatever. I take it on right away. And it's not just people I'm super close to. You can walk in, like I remember in corporate settings, I would walk into a room and you just feel the energy right away. And I would just absorb that energy rather than bring my own.
Mm.
And so I move between knowing and feeling a lot. I'm like, I know in my heart, I have a really strong sense of knowing. Like I am made for this purpose. This work lights me up whenever I am in it. And so how can I move from, okay, I'm feeling this right now, but I'm going to go back to what I know is true. And it's a game. It's a game of recognizing where I am right now in this feeling. What is that about? Do I get to forgive myself for something? Do I get to remind myself that I hold a truth? I forgive myself for judgments all the time, just as simple as I forgive myself for the misbelief that I am not capable today. I said it this morning before this interview. I know the truth that I am connected to source. So it's a lot of it's a lot of reminding and stopping, like moments of stillness throughout the day, multiple times a day.
Yeah. It's a reprogramming, isn't it? Because we were programmed without our consent, really. Society and schooling and parents who didn't know better and all of these things, right? So we get to now take the reins and reprogram ourselves, but that requires actually doing that because if you think about how we were programmed, let's say to compete. So we're programmed to compete, as you said. That's very true in our society. And that started with the freaking gold stars that you would get in nursery school, right? Or preschool. You get a gold star because you cleaned up your area the best out of everybody here, right?
Oh my
You get this praise that feels so good because, of course, it does. It feels good to be recognized. It feels good to be held in that way. But that recognition pitting you against other people is the false narrative, right? It's like we're all, and not that everybody is great at everything. I'm also not for the whole like participation award, like everybody gets a trophy. I don't feel that. I don't go the opposite direction because I don't feel that that's worthwhile either. But it's the whole system of rewards and punishments and recognizing someone's value based on what they do. So of course that's going to set us out to be doers and then set us out to outdo one another. And that's going to be outdoing one another on the playground and in the classroom and then of course goes into the work space. And that's what it's all set up for. My belief that it's all set up very strategically to do exactly that. So if we just unwind, and you use that word, but that you are in this phase of like unwinding, unlearning, unconditioning, we're deprogramming all of that. But then you've got to put back something else, right? You've got to reprogram after or at the same time, even as we unlearn, we've got to relearn who we really are, relearn what our real value is, relearn what this life is actually all about, how to live it. And all of that, I hope that people take from every episode that we do, because there's little nuggets from each of these episodes around practices that help in that reprogramming, in this living a life as I call it the everyday mystic, because it is being in our everyday life, living an everyday life, being an everyday person, but with this knowing that we are divine. And by knowing that we're divine, we don't even need to ask the question, am I worthy? Of course we are. We are a spark of creation. We are this emanation of the light. We are pure love in form? And how, so those questions that we have that come up a lot as we explore and heal, eventually it's like, oh, yeah, those questions are kind of pointless because I am.
Mhm.
And getting to that I am part and the knowing of that is that deep, deep truth that's like, oh my gosh, I now am free, free of the programs. Now, obviously, those programs are insidious. They're going to come back in through, a trigger here and a situation there and a life's challenge here. And that's just our opportunity at that time, right? To use the practices and the gifts that we've gathered and all the knowing that we've built up to be able to then deal with that thing a little differently this time around, right?
Yeah. And the word that keeps coming up is trust, trust,
Yeah.
trust, trust. And for me, like even in the spiritual, conscious, whatever we're labeling this world, it shows up all the time as my opportunity, which isn't always welcome. So, it's not easy to look at the women, the men, the humans who are doing what I want to do and remember that it's not a competition. It's not always easy to remember
Oh,
we
yeah.
don't have to live in scarcity, that we can actually cooperate and collaborate, and that we're not separate. And that what you're doing and me seeing what you're doing actually allows me to do what I want to do more easily, right? Because if I'm seeing what you're doing and it's available to you, then it's available to me. But that way of thinking and being is part of the reprogramming that we have to continually choose. Another phrase that I love to remember is that everything is hard. You just get to choose your hard. It's hard to stay numb and like that there's something more in life that you want, but you're apathetic about it or just resigned to the fact that where you are is good enough. That's not easy. It's not easy to lose weight. It's not easy to keep weight off. It's not easy to be married. It's not easy to be single. Like it's everything is a level of hard. It's just what do you want to give to it?
Mm. Yeah, exactly. We wouldn't be here down, in this earth walk, this realm, if we didn't want challenges. I believe we chose this and we get to choose then what those challenges, how we react to the challenges. So even something like stress is a reaction. There are stressors, certainly, right? There are stressors, and I might have a stressor that's different than your stressor. And, we might have, and then we have some that we share and that are universal. There's stressors. But then if we are in stress, that's a choice. That's something we can actually learn and gather gifts and practices, techniques to handle that stressor differently than another way that feels like stress. When we give too much energy to a concept like stress or a concept even like anxiety or a concept of depression, these big, big things here in this realm that a lot of people suffer from. If we give too much energy to those things, we're saying that they are more powerful than we are. And that might feel true in a moment or in your whole life. It may feel like depression is more powerful than you. And you get the dark cloud and you are just in it and you can't get out of bed. I get it. I've had periods of deep depression. The realization that we get to come to is that we're not less powerful than that. We are as powerful as it. But then why is it here? Why is it overpowering us? Well, then it's that knock on the door. It's like, it's trying to tell you something. Come on, it's shaking you. It's there for a reason. And then there's that choice point. What are we going to do about that? Are we going to listen to it? Are we going to ask it questions? Are we going to sit with it? We can do all of that. We don't have to sit in it and then let it beat us down. We're not sitting with it and letting it enslave us. We're sitting with it as a friend in counsel with this energy and going, why are you here? What do you need? What are you here to tell me, show me, give me? And operating in that way, and we can do this with all the energies that show up in our life. It could be an emotion, it could be a thought, something that is pervasive but maybe unwanted. We can sit with it and ask it that. We can have that conversation and we can build a relationship with it so that it becomes really what it is, or we see it finally as what it is, which is a friend. It is something that is here to tell us something. So, whatever then felt like a challenge, it's a good challenge. It's like, okay, now I get to figure this out. I get to figure out why this is here. That's very empowering just on its face to feel like you have that power to do that, even.
Right. That's what you summarized is taking your power back. That is recognizing that you don't have to react and live in that reaction all the time, that you get to say, hey, hold on, what is this about? And what do I get to do about it? And for me, as you were talking, it's this contrast, for people who know depression on a deep level, which I can't say that I do. Like I haven't fallen into the darkness of depression, but the opportunity there is the contrast of aliveness. Like if you have fallen into the depths of despair in terms of darkness and depression, then you also are able to live in an alive state that some of us don't have access to. And for me, it's obligation. Like my world has been obligation for the majority of my life. And now I'm like, well, if I go through that, what's on the other side? And for me, it's receptivity. It's how much can I receive? And that's what I'm in the practice of right now is learning that, you know,
Mhm.
and joy and obligation are also intertwined for me. I'm not going to do it out of obligation. I'm going to do it out of joy. What does that feel like? What does that look like? So it's, as you're talking, it's those questions that I remember, I bring up in those situations. And it's really interesting. Like it can change on a dime. Again, like conversations I have where something comes out and my kids, my friends, like if something comes out where I'm like, that was reactive, that was old me, I get to say, wait a second, like redo.
Yeah. Take
And that's
backs.
yeah, and it totally disrupts the mood, like it is a disruptor where it can change the energy. And people are like, "Oh, right, you're human. Right, I did that too." And then off we are again in a more blissful state than this like Eeyore state.
Yeah. The recognizing those repeating patterns is such a humbling experience, isn't it?
Mm,
You can see something for how other people have been experiencing it, which when you're in the pattern, you're so within your own ego state or within your own triggered trauma state that you can't see and feel and witness how it being felt by somebody else. But when you start to repattern, so then you're gaining some new tools and you're seeing things from maybe the 30,000-foot view of, oh, this is my higher self witnessing these things. You can then see what you said or what you did and how that impacts other people in a totally different way, and also discharge it like that. You're just, oh, oh yeah, that's silly of me, or oh, I'm so sorry. Whereas it could have been really, really, really hard to say sorry before about that thing because you're just operating from a different place. That to me is a product of healing, but it's a product of this reintegration of self, of whole self, and getting back to this wholeness that we are and have everything we need and more. So we don't have to worry about protecting this part of the ego that's feeling really vulnerable and scared and damaged and can't say sorry because it's going to hurt that part. It's being able to know that we're in a totally different state of being. Like you said, we're not the women we used to be. We're not the beings we used to be as we shift and evolve and know more and grow more, we can actually leave those things behind. We don't have to get deep into quantum physics and things, but I believe that's how we shift the past, because we're actually letting go of those versions, and those versions only exist in energetic thought patterns, which are that are there. They don't exist otherwise. So can we create a different existence of that? Yeah, absolutely. By thinking differently about it, we can shift out of those, let's say, less savory or just less wanted patterns really easily, when we start to live from this place of wholeness. So that's also, I think, the impetus to come into wholeness. And it isn't about getting rid of things. It's about integration, integration, integration. Like, actually come back, bring it all together, befriend the depression, befriend the negative things that, whatever you might think, oh, I'm so lazy. And why can't I get this thing done? Or why can't you mentioned losing weight. Like, I can't do this. I'm such a whatever. All of that are aspects of self that are here to show us, teach us, remind us, and guide us. So what do they have to tell? What do they have to give? And getting into that integration. So that to me is really the spiritual path. It's not the ascension, it's the reintegration.
Right.
It's that remembering, as you keep saying, the remembering, remember. We are putting it back together in one whole.
Yeah. In presence, like in this moment too, right? Like, I think that's a big part of it as well. It's not for the future or to repair the past necessarily. It's in this moment you get to be whole. And what does that feel like? Because that's where we live and that's where we are. And I'm thinking just another example of this is in work culture, is in corporate. And, I left a toxic work environment, which I'm sure, many of us have. And I was so angry and so much the victim, like it wasn't my fault at all. And it wasn't till years later, like literally a good 2 years later, where I really started to see, oh, wow, my role in that was XYZ. And interesting that I perpetuated that pattern or that, and I'm not saying it's all my fault, but I definitely had a role in it. And had I known what I know now, and this is what I'm curious about with shifting corporate culture in general is, well, in this moment, in this presence, like, what are you bringing to this? And what am I bringing to this? And why? I know when we're in that reactionary state and I'm going to like meet you and we're going to fight and duke it out, it's so hard. But I wouldn't be in that state as easily or as long as I would today that I was then, And so, how can we cultivate environments where we can say, wait a second, this isn't what I want. Is this what you want? And how can we backtrack and say, where is the alignment? Because the truth is, I signed a contract to work here and my responsibilities are XYZ and I feel a disconnect. So, can we talk about the disconnect? Or something like that. There's so many ways to do it. But from what I know, those conversations are few and far between. And I think that that's what we start to need to bring more of into everything.
Those environments are ripe for the work. They might be overripe for the work, but they're ready. They are ready for it. And, we could say that it all starts with awareness, that people are aware of their own individual patterns. And then and what they're bringing to a conversation, to a project, to whatever it is that they're meeting within that space, that our own individual or personal awareness is where it all begins. And it would be beautiful to see people within those spaces become more aware, self-aware, not aware of what they're producing and their numbers and metrics and rewards, but really aware of self. Who am I in this environment? Who am I as uh, a piece of this? and then go dial it even further back, right? Who am I in this life? And am I even satisfied with the conditions of this? So, like you said, we can perpetuate our own misery by just not doing what we know is right, which might be to leave, or might be to have that hard conversation, or might be to stop gossiping. The workplace can become very toxic just through gossip and just through this perpetuation of a lot of bullshit that doesn't have to be said because someone feels slighted or wronged and their ego is like, "Ah, I should have gotten that. And then they talk, oh, yeah, yeah, he's horrible. I can't believe that, blah, blah, right? And then that perpetuates so much negative energy that would maybe just started out as this little teeny seed that then is right, it's fertilized with a lot of bullshit rather than the good shit. The good shit could be, like, yeah, sometimes these things happen, we don't always know why. Or, yeah, it would be interesting for you to have a conversation with that person to, find out a little bit more about what they were thinking. Not make assumptions, not take things personally. I don't know if you've read the 4 Agreements by
Hmm.
Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a Bible for me because it's so simple, it's so wonderful, and those first 2 agreements are so important that we move through life not taking things personally because everybody is in their own game, as you mentioned, in their own play, they're creating their own reality, and you're a character in their reality, in their game. And maybe you're even an NPC in their game. You might not even be a main character. So we are all operating from that place, and we get to use that as a means to let go of some of that hate or some of that assumption, which leads to that next one of like, don't make assumptions because we don't know where things are coming from. We can dive into that. We can explore it. And that's great for exploration. Sometimes you won't know, and that's okay too. It's not our place to get somebody to confess who they are or where they're at or push them into doing anything. It's their game, their play, their story. If we can impact in any way, amazing, because we're all here to reflect back to one another. And I think the people that we have the most charge with, ooh, we're here to do some work with them. We're here to learn something deeply about ourselves through this situation. It's charged for a
Both
reason.
ways. The charge goes both ways. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it has to. Both have to in order to create that spark. So it is a really awesome opportunity, right, to explore that. Not everybody on the other side's willing to explore.
Right.
And then so we also have to be willing or okay with being okay with that. Oh, okay. Well, I can explore this for myself. I can actually discharge this myself, even without the consent of that person or without working directly with them. I can do this in the multidimensional space. I might just go in and visualize a meeting with that person and having a conversation with that person and apologizing, discharging it, asking them what they need. We can have these soul to soul conversations in our own, with ourselves and with them, but not in the human to human ego space, which may not be welcomed sometimes. So I think that's fun too, to be
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
dive into that.
You're talking about Ho'oponopono.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit to an extent. And what you were saying is don't take it personally. And that's another huge tool. It's such a tool. It's not personal, it's structural, which is something I learned from another teacher. And it's something that I will remember forever. It's not personal, it's structural. There's some structure within that person, within yourself, that has been created that you need to restructure, right? That allows you to react that way. And so another question is, when people are in that misery of gossip is just how do you feel? We don't ask ourselves like how do you really feel? It's, how are you doing? Fine, fine, and then we move on, but like how do you feel? So, because that's the first clue I think to discovering the structure. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had a client who, and I was a fractional role. So I was in a lot of meetings with them, and they would start out the meetings through everybody sharing something personal about how they're feeling, something about their day, had nothing to do with work. It was just like something that's going on outside of work. It could be joyful and amazing. It could be stressful and not great, but it helped to humanize the whole team, right? And that's something that in a lot of corporate spaces, it's so dehumanizing because you're treated like a cog in the wheel. You're not seen as a person outside of what you produce. A lot of that's shifting, I know, in corporate spaces, but there's absolutely room for more growth in that department. And I don't mean like you go to work and you spill out your guts and you use it as a therapy session, or that you end up burdening your workplace, your teams, and then therefore the work that you're all doing together with all your problems. But being human by being able to just share a little tidbit of your life, good or bad, or anything in between, it seems just really natural that we would get to know each other in that way. And, the place that we used to work together, it was often sharing a fun fact about ourselves so that people could just each time, each meeting, get to know you a little bit more. Although I feel like the fun fact always puts pressure on like something so like,
Sure.
yeah, it's like, is this more fun than, is this weird enough? Is this outrageous enough? Is this,
Right. Right. You're gonna remember this one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I got to come up with something really fun this time rather than just something mundane. Like, oh yeah, like my cat is sick. So I've been a little tired because we were at the vet like for, overnight.
Yeah.
So, something like that.
That's real.
So that humanizing in all spaces, really being able to see each other both as human beings, but then even going, if we can go deeper, see each other as these souls on a journey in these bodies having this experience together and being like, oh, isn't this going to be fun? We get to work some of this stuff out together because we've signed a contract, both in work contract, but then you've committed to that. So we're obviously here as part of a soul contract too. So to be able to actually see each other in that way and do that work together is super fun. I haven't been in a space quite like that yet. And, I feel like, well, maybe we just have to create it then.
Let's do it. Yeah. So fun. I know what the thing I'm thinking of too is like how much of yourself are you bringing to work? How much of yourself are you bringing to life? Is it the whole part of you? Most likely not, because that takes a long time to step into wholeness. But, one silly example is I used to be the one that was so rigid when there was an opportunity to dance, like and I took dance as a kid. Like I, like knew some moves to like now I do a few live or recorded videos on social media where I'm like, this is how I feel today. And it's a song and I'm
You're like,
dancing a little bit more. And it's like, who is that? Like, what happened? Where I would be the self-conscious person who can't move because people will judge me to let's just have some fun because come on, like we
yeah,
need more.
absolutely. Yes. More fun, which is, it's like a reclaiming too. Going back to that remembering, it's remembering how we entered into this world, right? As kids, hopefully you had a childhood where you were having fun. I mean, I know some kids that was stolen from them, but most of us as kids had a lot of fun. We were very unencumbered. We were just out there being wild and weird and having a good time and not feeling that judgment. And then that gets layered in over the years and gets when we get programmed. Going back to that, right? We get programmed to feel judged. Are people really judging us? Do people really care how we're moving, dancing, whatever? No, they're just thinking about how embarrassed they would be if they were doing that. Everybody is just kind of in their own lane, in their own place, just feeling like everybody is always in their space, but it's actually a reflection of how they would feel. And right, that they're judging themselves in that space. So we can give a gift to the other humans around us by being in that joy and in that fun, because hopefully then that reflects something in them that they go, okay, I want to do that. Like it happens on the dance floor all the time. If you're the first one on the dance floor, or whoever breaks that, right? Whoever gets to be is the first one on the dance floor. And then all of a sudden you've got two more, five more, eight more. And then the dance floor is full. It's just what happens. We're so good for each other in that way. So I love the work that you're setting out to do. I love that you're going to be that bridge between this spiritual understanding of self and then that who we are in the corporate world and in that corporate space, and how do we bridge that gap and bring over some beautiful gifts from just being more conscious of who we are, because who we are doesn't go away once we're in corporate spaces. It oftentimes gets hidden and put away. But wouldn't things be more fun and productive if they weren't?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thanks for getting out there and doing that hard work. And more importantly, doing the hard work within yourself, because that's where it all begins. And you're walking the walk, you're doing the work for yourself. And that's the necessary part of bringing those gifts then out to the world. So thank you for that. I'm honored to be with you, and I'm so happy that you came onto the podcast.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah. Likewise, Carissa. Thank you so much.